I should be with you. But somehow I find that I can't be. And I say this not as a complaint or a rebuke, but hopefully as a kind of reflection for you on the left, that maybe your big tent isn't as welcoming as you think it is, or as I believe you want it to be. When I was in prison, I was in the midst of the most racially polarized, culturally polarized, divided, segregated community I'd ever been in my life. It was shocking to discover how tribal everything was, how the blacks sat at black tables in the dining hall, a black section. The whites sat in a white section. The people from Mexico sat at their own tables. The people from Guatemala sat at their own tables. The people from Buffalo, New York sat at their own tables. The people from Rochester sat at a different table. And in this community where everything was so divided, I had certain latitude and certain privileges as an older white man, but I didn't use them to make my time easier or more cushy for myself. I tried to use those advantages in ways that would benefit other people. I knew I had grown up in a similar culture to the guards, and I knew that I could speak to them about racism and the way they treated inmates, just as a way of life. I knew I could speak up about those things in ways that others couldn't. And so I did. I had one of my best friends in prison was a black man from Philadelphia, and we both could see how silly these racial divisions were and how hurtful. And we built a friendship like none other I've had in my life. And we both liked messing with this racial divisiveness. I had found that you could have a really good connection with a conversation with a black man or anyone from another race, a different tribe, someone who is different from you. You could have a really good conversation one day, but when you got back in the dining hall or back around their tribe, oftentimes they would act like they'd never even met you. And so my friend Bird from Philadelphia and I would constantly mess with this. He would walk down the line to get chow, and he'd be standing in the middle of the dining hall, and he'd yell out to me at the top of his lungs across the black section and the white section, "Hey, Parker, how you doing today?" And I'd just laugh, and we'd walk together in the yard, and, he would say hi to his friends, and we were just friends, and we didn't care what anyone else thought about this. I've told the story here of how I sat next to a table that had white gay men sitting at it, and then they invited some of their black gay friends into the white section to sit there. And this caused such an uproar in the white section. And I was the only person who stayed at that table and sat alone at a table where being in a tribe is important. I sat alone at a table next to the gay table just because I wasn't gonna break ranks with men I had come to know and love over my time there. For me, the policies of inclusion and racial justice and embracing everyone aren't just beliefs for me. They're heartfelt expressions that I had to decide what I was going to do about in a place where that was very, very polarized and where it could be dangerous to break ranks with your tribe. My tribe, whether I liked it or not, was the white guys. But I wasn't going to be hemmed in by that. I wasn't there to try to change prison because that was way beyond my capacity. But I was there to live out a truth of unity and connection and love of difference and love of so-called different people that had been building up my entire life. And this was a chance to express it. So I should be in your tent. I should want to be there. These principles of unity are not new to me. They're not theories to me. They're connections I made where I had to cry in relief at the joy of making a connection with someone I never would have known if I hadn't been to prison. Stories I never would have heard if I hadn't been to prison. Love that I never would have felt if I hadn't been to prison. So why don't I want to be in this liberal, democratic, progressive tent? It's dangerous to speak generally, but it's the best I can do for the moment. So if this reflection doesn't include you or what liberalism or being a Democrat or being a progressive means to you, I apologize in advance. But I have seen so much from this community that talks about inclusiveness, that talks about everyone being welcome, that talks about human rights, that doesn't feel inclusive, that doesn't feel welcoming. So many of you have taken civil rights, human rights, racial issues, and you've turned them into good and bad, right and wrong. We on the left are the inclusive ones. We are the ones who welcome everyone. We have always done this. We have always been right about this, and we always will be. And everyone else needs to be more like this. When we come up with a new name for Black and Indigenous people, or we come up with new pronouns for gay and lesbian people, for trans people, we know that we are right, and we know that everyone else needs to believe the same things that we believe, and we need to impose these rigid versions of equality on everyone else. I damn near got kicked out of a human service organization over a disagreement about the use of pronouns, how this had to be enforced on everyone, or you couldn't even work within this organization. I've heard countless stories of people having difficult experiences, personal, work-related experiences with people of different cultures, Black people, Hispanic people, people who are so-called different, having difficult experiences at work and trying to figure out those experiences, or trying to say, hey, why are you acting this way? Why are you not helping me at my job? Why is this happening? People, genuine people trying to do their job, trying to address personal situations that come up at work, and being labeled a racist because they didn't toe the liberal, progressive, democratic line about how you're supposed to do these things. I had a dear friend who almost got fired from his job because he kept messing up the pronouns. He kept forgetting to say they, them instead of he, she. And this was a red line. We've talked for years about conservatives having red lines, litmus tests around abortion, you name it. But there are so many ways that we have turned our what should be heartfelt beliefs into rigid, judgmental systems that alienate people, that label people. My God, I've spent a lot of time listening as I've walked deeper into this political debate, listening to Democrats and progressives on their YouTube pages and calling MAGA people just every name you can imagine, just so easily tossing off terms like racists and idiots and bigots and fascists and this and that. And of course, is there deep-rooted racism in MAGA and in the Republican Party and in the conservative history in our country, in the whole history of our country? Of course there is. Is it important for thoughtful, caring people to stand up to this racism and to these ways that people are being denied their humanity, have been denied their humanity in ways that overlook centuries of oppression? Is it important to stand up for people's rights, for people's humanity, to stand up in small ways and big ways to the racism that's part of our culture? You're damn right it is. But do we have to do this by doing the very thing that we say we're not doing, by creating divisions, by not getting to the root of where does this racism come from? Where do people, how do people wind up this way? How do you get to the bottom? I remember years ago hearing a story, I wish I could remember the guy's name, but an interview, I think it was on NPR, with a black man who'd made friends with a grand wizard of the KKK. And this grand wizard of the KKK through his relationship with this black man, had softened in ways that would be inconceivable. And eventually, as I remember the story, he ended up giving this black man his robes from the KKK. It is possible, it is doable to make connections through and beyond all the ways, all the artificial ways that life has divided us. It can be done. I did it in prison. I've done it many times in my life. And it comes through making a personal connection. People don't change their attitudes about race or generations of conditioning and woundedness around race because we try to jam something down their throat. They don't change their opinions or their actions or their beliefs or their feelings because we come up with a new and better word for black people or gay people, because we add new letters to the gay alphabet because we come up with new terms and then try to get everyone else to do it right. And if you don't do it right, you're just a stinking racist and you don't want to change and you're a bigot and you're a fascist and you're all these things. That doesn't work. And there is so much just tossing off of a whole segment of our community because frankly, because they don't follow your self-righteous, virtue signaling, stupid rules. Because the left, all too many times, not all of you, all obviously, and not in every case, but you are cramming things down people's throats. You are asking people functionally to deny their personal experience. What is my day-to-day experience with Black people? What has happened to me? What have I learned? What have I been taught? What have I seen? And what of this is conditioning? And what of this has wisdom in it, has personal experience that I need to process and figure out? But we're asking people and functionally forcing people to deny their experience in favor of a set of ridiculously rigid, self-righteous rules about what it means to be a good person. I've seen people on the left excusing all kinds of bad behavior, all kinds of criminal behavior, all kinds of violent behavior because of the history of oppression of the people who are committing that behavior. And that's a great understanding to have. It's important to understand the history of racism, the history of gay oppression, the deep reasons why people are living in the streets, why there's so much despair and giving up happening in our culture. Those things are good to understand. Why don't you bring that same understanding to the people in MAGA who are as human as anyone else? Why don't you bring that understanding? How did they get like this? Do you really think that if I don't even want to come into your tent, do you really think that you're going to include the people from MAGA in your tent? And I've heard many of you on your websites and in person saying you don't want to include these people in your tent. So where's the inclusion? Where's the everyone belongs here? Do they only belong here when they conform to these rigid, ridiculous, virtue signaling rules? Or do they get to come in with their imperfections? Do they get to be respected just like the cultural minorities that we somehow have found space in our hearts for? Do they get to come in and work things out and join in this inclusive, welcoming big tent too? Or are we really going to think that we've got it all figured out on the left, folks? Everybody else just needs to be more like us. Listen to what's being said here. Listen to, I just had a public exchange in my community about the homeless situation here in Montpelier, Vermont. I was raising how deep a problem this has become, how frustrated people in the community are becoming with bad behavior, drug use, violence, public defecation, mistreatment of young people walking to school, how all these issues are just being overlooked because somehow there's this feeling that we can't hold homeless people accountable. We call them unhoused, as though their situation is something that's just been done to them. They have no choice and no accountability for how they're living their lives and how they act in our communities. And liberals and progressives and Democrats have enabled this behavior for a long time now. Yes, offering compassion. No, not offering accountability. Maybe MAGA doesn't hate your policies as much as you think they do. Maybe they hate your arrogance. Maybe they hate a silly set of rules being jammed down their throat. Maybe MAGA isn't the only group of people in our country that needs to look at their behavior, that needs to look at their policies, that needs to look at the deep-seated ways that their beliefs harm our community. Maybe it's time for the Democrats, the progressives, the liberals to take a good long look in the mirror as well. It's a broken mirror, but even a broken mirror can give you a pretty damn good reflection if you're willing to look through the cracks. You're making space in your tent for all kinds of minorities, all kinds of oppressed people. If you don't make space in your tent for everyone, it's always going to be a divided tent. We can all do better. If you've been listening to this conversation, you know I'm not a MAGA person. I'm not in favor of the lying, the conspiracy theories, the institutionalized racism that's at the heart of things, the way people's experiential racism is being exploited by powerful people to serve their own interests, their own economic and power interests. I'm not for that. But I'm here to say, those of you who consider yourselves liberal, Democrats, progressives, can look in this mirror as well. Maybe MAGA isn't the only one who's wrong. Maybe we all have something to learn, places to reflect, places to look deeper. This is a very difficult conversation, and of course I'm not doing it perfectly. Since I dove into it, I woke up at 2:30 in the morning, came to the only quiet place in our house where I can come and not bother anyone. Because once it takes hold of you, once it takes hold of me, I can't help but say, we all need to look in this broken mirror. There are changes being called for from all of us. MAGA's pointing the finger at the libs, and you don't like it. You're pointing the finger at MAGA, and it's keeping even someone like me, who should agree with you, out of your tent. I'm inviting you to take a look in this broken mirror yourselves. Let's see what we all can learn. Thank you for listening.